That's 877-565-8391. If you want to read more about what you're hearing about, obviously this is the way to proceed. Now, Ingo, you specified when we talked before the show that you didn't want to talk about any other remote viewers specifically, and I respect that, and I understand that. But I do want to ask this. There is an incredible amount of dissension, backbiting, angst, difficulty between many of the remote viewers. What do you attribute that to?
Well, it's an extension of what goes on in parapsychology itself. If you think there's dissension somewhere, you should get into the middle of parapsychology. And I've discussed this with Dr. Charles Tart, for instance, who is a well-known parapsychologist and everything. I mean, why is there this dissension?
Yes.
And he admitted he didn't know. But, you know, parapsychology does not enjoy full scientific acceptance, so there are no boards or committees that are established to sort of keep this dissension under manageable control. And there's certainly nothing like that in the open field of remote viewing either. So you have people doing what they do, you know, trying to claim territory and things like that. My position is, in terms of the general public, that any remote viewing is better than none at all, because even bad remote viewing you learn something from. And I think that if remote viewing is going to be of interest to the general public, then the general public has to deal with it. I don't have to deal with it anymore. I'm retired, okay?
Yes.
And I respect anybody who undertakes to make sense out of remote viewing and all of these other things. I think probably some of them have limited frames of reference and don't build a bigger picture of things, but that's irrelevant in a way, because people have to deal with something themselves in order to gain realities about it. It's that simple. For instance, you can't read any book and think you've gained any reality. What you've gained is maybe a bigger frame of reference to consider matters under. So it's hands-on, and those people that took remote viewing into the open field, I think it was a very brave thing of them to do, but they have to deal with it, not me.
And now back to the best of Art Bell.
During the military remote viewing program, were there any people who lost it, who could not handle what they were trying to do or the information they were receiving? It's another way of asking, I suppose, whether for some individuals it would be dangerous.
I personally don't know anything of that kind. In fact, the military part of this only started in about 1980, and so there was 10 years preceding that, okay?
Right.
When this was all being developed. And we called for volunteers at SRI to do remote viewing experiments. You know, we got 200 volunteers, and all of them were extremely enthusiastic, and the enthusiasm, you see, one of the reasons why I don't think I should be called the grandfather of remote viewing, I don't like the idea of being a grandfather anyway, it's forgotten that in order to make remote viewing something that amounted to something, this involved over 500 people. And most of them just devoted their guts and blood to making these issues real. And if you say I'm the grandfather of remote viewing, or Hal Puthoff is, he deserves the title, I don't. But if you say either one of us are, then you're obliterating the efforts of these other 500 people. And I don't think that's fair, because they worked their guts out, you know, and they resisted the bad press, they resisted the bad publicity, they resisted getting fired because they were involved, and so forth and so on. And our experience at SRI was consistently that anybody who got involved in it was really enthusiastic and had no problems at all in handling what they got engaged in. The problem came before, when people were afraid that their minds were somehow going to be altered.
Sure.
And and if this was a strong point, they weren't accepted as a candidate for experiment. Because, I mean, you don't need to deal with that, when you have enthusiastic people who say, well, I'll do anything to learn more about myself, for instance. Other things other programs elsewhere that were invasive and forced things in and so forth and so on, I think there were some bad reactions. But this cannot be said of the SRI program. Mm-hmm. Absolutely not.
Andrew in Phoenix asks the following of you. What was the scariest, strangest remote viewing session or incident you ever participated in?
Oh, Puthoff and I had to agree to do what were called operational targets.
Yes.
For the funding parties, and we did hundreds of them, And the most awful one had to do with a target in what was then East Germany, and they couldn't tell what was going on from the surface, from photos and things, fly over satellites.
Sure.
And things. So it was assigned. I didn't know whether it was just assigned by coordinate, and underground. On top, it would seem like a prison, but underground, it was a biological experimental station of all these terrible diseases and drugs and everything.
Human biological experiment.
Oh, yes. It was just dreadful, and I can almost start weeping again. I ended up, this is just so horrible that finally I just broke into tears, and this was terrible, terrible, terrible.
In remote viewing something like that, how much transference of the pain and the horror? Apparently, there's a lot.
It can be almost complete. Early in my career, I worked with the New York Police Department to help solve crimes.
Yes.
And when you came across victims that had their throats slit and their hands cut off and things like this, remember, you can view it, if you can remain objective for these things, you can sort of detach, but if you start experiencing what the victims went through, then your whole system thinks that's what's happening to you. And so after 2 years, I said, hey, guys, I can't do this anymore. You have to use these. At that time, there were 3 female psychics in New Jersey who could tolerate this. And I said, you have to use them. I can't do this anymore. I'm not built that way.
Huh.
And even though I had a background in biology, I used to draw autopsies at the Salt Lake City General Hospital while they were being done and things. But there you remained objective. You didn't sense the sensations and so forth and so on. So, no, this East German thing was just awful, because actually it was the first time I'd ever seen anything like that. And the extent of it, and the smells in these underground chambers were not to be believed.
All of that came through.
All of that came through. It was just terrible.
Ingo, I'm looking at my own website right now, and I know you say you've only got 2 books, but Penetration is the first one listed, Penetration, the Question of Extraterrestrial and Human Telepathy. Mm-hmm. But it's followed by The Great Apparitions of Mary.
Yes, that's still in print, but I didn't publish that myself.
An examination of the 22 supernatural appearances.
That's still in print, and in my website, where that can be ordered from is in my website.
Also Amazon.com, by the way.
Oh, is it?
Oh, yes.
Oh, great.
You didn't know that?
Well, actually, my royalty statements don't reflect that.
Well, they will soon, as well as Purple Fables Quartet.
Yes, that's still in print.
On Amazon. Opening to the Infinite, Human Multidimensional Potential.
Are you talking about your Nostradamus factor?
I'm talking about a book called Opening to the Infinite, Human Multidimensional Potential. Now,
that's not mine.
That's not yours, huh?
No.
Well, then I don't know how we got that up there. You're right. Well, now, wait a minute. You did, I see how it got up there. You did the introduction to that book.
Oh, yes.
Right?
Oh, that's Alice What's-Her-Name's book,
yes,
my
dear
friend.
That's right.
Yes, she passed away.
I see, so that's how it got up there. All right, well...
I did the introduction to that.
I'm very interested in the apparitions of Mary. What work did you do on that, and what can you tell us about that?
Well, early on at SRI, part of our mandate was to assess this whole general field of everything, And I got it. I said, well, the apparitions of Mary are paranormal. We were supposed to assess the paranormal, okay? And the client wasn't interested in that, but I got interested in it, and I started accumulating information about these things. So these are tremendous stories. And actually, it took a long time to sell that book or this version of it because publishers said, well, nobody's really interested in those things. But these are tremendous stories. So I wrote it from the societal historical point of view and just sort of reported what I could find went on at these times. And these are some of the, these are really amazing events. So that's what that book's about.
Were they real events?
Oh, yes.
Were they real events as perceived by the world of Marian apparitions? Were they?
I have to accept that as so, yes.
You do?
Yes.
That brings a lot with it.
Yes, it do indeed.
Have you ever done targets like, for example, the man Jesus, the Son of God,
nope.
So said, that walked upon earth?
No. I don't do targets where there's no feedback potential. I never did one that didn't have a feedback potential. If you don't have feedback, then you don't know what you have. Anybody can say anything. So I have always had, right from the first, by the way, in 1970 when I started, I had to decide to do only experiments where there was almost immediate feedback as to whether you were right or wrong or what was going on, okay?
Right.
And I maintained that attitude up until I retired. So if there was no feedback potential, then I did not do it. And this isn't to say that it can't be done, because I think it can. But
right.
Remember, I worked with scientists. I never worked with anybody else but a scientist. I never gave any demonstrations to anybody.
And scientists, of course, are only interested in what can be
right.
repeated and proven.
Right. So I've rigorously held to that until I retired.
You said until you retired. Do you continue to do work, and have you expanded the work you do since your retirement? Personally.
Well, yes and no. I've felt interested in going behind the scenes of all these things and pointing up information that's not generally available, since it's not really recognized as existing. The invisible. If you're talking about the concrete world of physicality, you can probably get a handle on everything. But if you're talking about the realms of the mind, you're talking about invisible realms, which have their own phenomena, and these are not clearly presented anywhere. So I'm writing up what I've learned, and along these lines. And when I'm done writing up with what I've learned, I really tend to retire. I'm going to get rid of all my archives and books, and I'm going to go watch the grass grow.
Are you
or
really?
I'll come out where you are and watch the sand move around.
Yes,
I was born in Telluride, Colorado, so I appreciate natural beauty really much. And
a lot of people look at the desert and they go, "Oh my God, a wasteland," but it's not.
The desert's fabulous.
Yes.
Every once in a while, I make a tour through the Southwest just to look at the desert.
It'd be a good time. We're within a few days now of what I think is going to be about 1,000-year bloom here in the desert because of the amount of moisture.
Yeah.
And I'm about 20 miles